Okay, we're up to the bottom of Mem Beis Amid Beis. Today's daf is Mem Gimel. We're up to the bottom of Mem Beis Amid Beis, and we're discussing the speech of the Meshuach Milchama, the one who was anointed to give the speech, a special Kohen. And we saw yesterday that there's like dual people speaking. We have the Kohen speaking, we have the Shaitrim speaking, and we have the Kohen speaking to the Shaitrim, as we'll see. So the lashon of when they get to the war, it says the V'nigash HaKohen v'diber el ha'am v'amar aleim Shema Yisrael atem krevim hayom le'mulchama al oivechem el Al yerech levavchem al tiru al tachbetzu al tartzu mifneihem. That four lashon we said yesterday of yerach, tiru, tachbetzu, tartzu was connected to four different sounds that the people would do during war. Ki Hashem Elokeichem. What would he say? Hashem Elokeichem haholech imachem li'lachem. What's the lashon of haholech imachem? That Hashem is going with you. Just say Hashem is with you. What's the lashon of haholech? So the Gemara is gonna address that. Says the Gemara, v'atem iatem kain. You're not that way because Hashem Elokeichem haholech imachem. V'kol kach lama. Why all of this? Mifnei sheHashem b'chol kinuyoy moinchim ba'aron. The lashon of haholech means Hashem would go with you. Hashem would go with you. There was the Aron, and in the Aron would go in front of them before battle. Now, there's a machlokes whether there were two Aronis or one. Let's go with the opinion that there was two. Moshe received the Torah. He kept it in a box. After the command to build the Mishkan and the Kelo of the Mishkan, he built the beautiful Aron, the ornament with the kruvim of gold. He then placed the luchos in that. But according to this opinion, in the box that Moshe made initially remained the shivrei luchos, the broken pieces of the luchos remained there. It's those broken pieces of luchos that went to war. It's those pieces of luchos that went to war, and Hashem was with them. One time in history, there was a time in history where, in fact, the real Aron did go to war. That was Bimei Chofni and Pinchas, who were the Kahanim with their father Eli in Shiloh. It went to war. Shiloh was destroyed, and it was captured by the Plishtim, and it was in the hands of the Plishtim for 7 months. That was the only time that it was there. But when we're speaking over here about the Aron, we're speaking about this wooden Aron that Moshe made, not the Aron with the kruvim. That stayed the Aron with the kruvim. That stayed in the Beis Hamikdash proper, or at whichever point in history it was. And the Aron went with them. So this is, what was the Aron? The Aron, the whole key, all the shemus of Hashem, the different names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Adnos, Kael, Tzvakos, all the different kinuyim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'cheinu Omer, in addition, the pasuk says, by Yishlach Oisam Moshe, Elef Lamate Latzava, Oisam Ves Pinchas. The battle against Midian, the Torah describes, Moshe sent 1,000 of each Shevet to the army. Oisam them best Pinchas. And the Gemara dashens. Oisam, who's Oisam? Ela Sanhedrin. That the Sanhedrin went out to war with them. Pinchas, who's Pinchas? Because he was the Kohen that was Meshuach Mulchama. Pinchas was the Kohen Meshuach Mulchama, and he went to war. Uklei HaKodesh. And what's the Klei HaKodesh? Zeha Aron, Belucha Shaboy. The Klei HaKodesh is the Aron, the Lucha Shaboy. So you see that the Aron went to battle. The Chatzoitzres Hatrua, Elu HaShefares, that was the shofars that they would go ahead and use. Hana, Lo L'chinim Halach Pinchas L'Milchama. Pinchas did not go arbitrarily. Ella Lipara Din La'avi Imo. He went to go ahead and take retribution for what the Midyanim had done to his maternal grandfather. Who is his maternal grandfather? Shneimar. Midyanim Morchu Yisrael Mitzrayim. The Midyanim sold Yosef to Mitzrayim. So it comes out that even though Pinchas paternally was the son of Elazar HaKohen, maternally he was a descendant of Yosef, as the Gemara now will discuss. The Gemara now will discuss his lineage. Right? The Gemara, remember, you mean to say that Pinchas me Yosef Asi, that Pinchas came from Yosef, Baksiv, the Elazar ben Aaron, Lokach Loi Mebnois Potiel Loi Leisha. Elazar ben Aaron took for him from the daughters of Potiel a wife, and Elazar's wife was from Potiel. Who is Potiel? That's Yisro. So maternally, you see, it was the side Yisro, not Yosef. It was Yisro. So my love, the Osemi Yisro, is not that they came from Yisro, Shepitem Agolim Avodas Kechavim, who fattened calves for Avodah Zarah. That's why it's called Poitiel, a play on words, Lashim Fatem. So how can you tell me that maternally it came from Yosef? Maternally, Pashtus, he came from what? He came from Yisro. Says the Gemara, Loi Mi Yosef Shepit Peit Bi Yitzray. It's the Pitiel over here is that what? That it came from Yosef, who was able to be Kovash his Yitzray. He was able to go ahead and overcome his Yitzhahara when it came to Eshes Potiphar. Right? The Gemara, it's easy to say that Potiel means Yosef, but if we look at exactly the occurrence, what happened was Pinchas went ahead and he killed Cosby, right? He killed Zimri the Cosby. Zimri was the prince of Shevet Shimon, and they made fun of him. Who is this lowlife who came from Yisro, who went ahead and killed Zimri? Well, they shvatim mevazan. They said, "Re'isem ben poiti zeh." Do you see the son of this poiti, right? That means ben shepitem avi imoy, the ben that is maternal grandfather. Agol avodas kechavim, right? And he went ahead and he vayaroi gnasi b'Yisrael and he killed Zimri. So l'chayri, you can't say potiel means that it was pit beit Yosef. Potiel l'chayri means what? Yisro. So back to the original question: how can you tell me that he came from Yosef? Partially, he came from Yitzray. Ella says the Gemara. I'll tell you the following: if his paternal grandfather came from Yosef, then his maternal grandfather. In other words, there's always two grandfathers. There's the male and the female. So if the male came from Yosef, then the female side came from Yisro. If Yosef, and if the female side came from Yosef, then Avu the Ime me Yisro. So l'chayra, he had both. Be'ekanami, that there was potiel, is a play on words on both mefating. One for avodah zarah, fattening the calves, and one for going ahead and being kosher. It's right. Potiel. Now potiel is written with a yud. So trey mashma, it's mashma. It says potiel with a yud. Mashma, it's master two. Which the two? Yosef and Yisro, that we can apply the term mefatim to. Shmamino yilchayra, you have a good raya. Shmamino, you have a very, very, very good raya. Okay. Now, he said yesterday that he would give two speeches to Kayin. The first speech he would give was by Basfar when they were leaving Eretz Yisrael, going to war, and he would tell them, Mio Yisha Rachlev, whoever was scared, and he would say, should go home. Bisha, we're going to see that the person who didn't build a house yet, the person who just got married, who wasn't fill his kerem, he made that speech. Those people would leave. And then he came to the battle site, and he came to the battle site, and he gave another speech. He said, Shema Yisrael. He said, Shema Yisrael. Then it says, Ki Hashem Elokechem Halechem Achim Elachim Mashiachem. Then it says, V'dibru Hashaitim Elam. The Shaitim would speak to the people. Someone who built a house and did not go ahead and live in it yet. Let him go home. Let's get killed in battle. Who planted a vineyard, and he didn't get usage of it because it has this din of arla, and he was machalal the fourth year of kerem to use it. Should go home. Third thing, if you're engaged, you had kedushin, but you didn't have the suin, go home. And then it says, finally, they continue to go ahead. That your other brothers should not, in battles, should not get scared seeing you leave. So what's what's the addition over here? It's mashbid is a kayin, and the kayin would speak to the shaiter. The shaiter would be. So we have to figure out. We have three speeches over here. We have a kayin, b'nigash kayin, We said we have a dibru hashaitrim, and then the yasu hashaitrim. They can continue to go ahead and speak. So we have to fill in those three blanks. We have to fill in the nikash hakayin. We have to fill in what the shaitrim, the dibru hashaitrim, and then the yasu hashaitrim. That's what we're going to go ahead and fill in. But first, we're going to do the Mishnah. So the dibru hashaitrim elon leimar misha shabona bayis chodesh lechinchov leilch v'yesh lebeisai. Now, which house are we speaking about? Which house are we speaking about? Echad abayna bayis hateven, whether it's a beis hateven for store, a silo, beis habakar, a barn, beis ha'etzim, storage bin for what? For wood, beis ha'oitzrois, for wine, I guess. Echad abone, whether you built it, elokeh, if you bought it for the first time. Echad yarish, whether you inherited it and you haven't used it, or shenas matana, was receiving matana. So this is more inclusive. It doesn't mean that he just has to build it. It has to be that way. It can be more inclusive, that it can be anything that's royal adira that you could live in. A barn, a beis eitzim would also be a reason to return from the battle site. That would also be a reason to return from the battle site. Now, the next thing, he didn't get a chance to go mechal. Again, the first 3 years of a fruit-bearing tree's life, it's called arla, you can't use it. The 4th year, it's called neter avoy. It has the din of ma'aser sheni. You go ahead, you take it, bring it up to Yerushalayim. So if a person did not have a chance to go ahead and be mechal of the tree, he would go ahead and return from the battle. Whether he plants a kerem, whether he plants 3 fruit-bearing trees. In other words, lav dafka kerem, a vineyard. Mashma, the only reason you return is a vineyard, even if it's an orchard, an apple orchard, or an orange grove. These also he will return, provided it's 5 trees in the configuration of what a vineyard. If you took Rashi as a picture over here, guys, you see the picture in Rashi. That's the configuration. 2 against 2, and one like literally the tail. The zon of Rashi gives you a little picture there. And even if it's all the 5 trees are different trees, also you return. This is important. Whether you planted it, the echad hamavrich, whether you were mavrich it, the echad hamarkiv, or whether you were markiv it. Okay, I know very little about agriculture, but it seems there's something called markiv, mavrich, where you would take the root of the tree, you would go ahead and put it in the ground, and now a new tree would grow, and you would cut the middle, and now you'd have 2 trees. That's mavrich. Markiv is simply a graft. You make a hole in a tree, and you take a branch from another tree, and you stick it into what? Into the existing tree. So that's whether you haven't had use of a tree that you went and did hakava or havracha. The key word here is hakava, grafting, is we're going to go ahead and deal with. Whether those also would you be able to return from the battle site in order to go ahead and have enough from that. Next, Umiya ish asher, the pasuk says, Umiya ish asher eras isha v'loy lekacha, then yelech v'yashiv lebeisa. So you go back. You didn't get a chance to live with her yet. You married her, but again, you didn't have the sue and go back home. Echad Amar says a basula, whether it's a girl who was a basula, she never lived with. The Echad Amar says almana, or it's your first wife, even though she was married previously. Afilu shemeres yavam. Even if she was married to your brother, and you have a zika in marriage, and you have been mekayim the mitzvah of yibum, you could return from the battle site to go ahead and be mekayim the mitzvah of yibum. Even if you heard that your brother died in battle, you go back to the shemeres yavam. Kol elu. Okay. Now the elu shoymim divrei kayin me'archei milchama, and these are the ones. Those are the ones that would hear the words v'chayzrin, and they would go back. The elu shoymim divrei kayin me'archei v'chayzrin, they would go back home. But don't think for a second that they would go home and just live the life of Riley. They would still have to do some work. U'misafkim mayim, they provide water for the people at the battle site. U'mazon and food, they bring that back. And they would go ahead and make sure the infrastructure, that the roads were clear to go ahead and facilitate the travel of the soldiers. Okay, so these are the ones that would go back home, and these are the ones that would provide for the soldiers food and drink and cleaning the roads. And these are people who do not go back. A beis shar, if you remember from our Erevin days, Outside the chutzah, you'd have a shara, a picture of a gate. It's not a place that we'd live in. It's not called a dira. If you build a beis shar, you would not go back for the battle. You would remain by the battle site. Achsadros, a portico, four-sided. Umar peset. We said that's these are the Erevin terms. Anotea arba ilone, not 5, but you plant 4. Maichla uvachamesh ilone srak, or 5 trees, but they're not fruit-bearing trees. They're non-fruit-bearing trees. And all of these would not go back from the battle. They would stay by the battle. Hamaksa trusasoy, if someone remarries his own wife, or almanul kain gadol gushu chlutzu kain hedyet, mamzeres and sin Yisrael chai ve'lavim, by Yisrael mamzel and a sin. Right, we all know the terms, the sin and gavonim, mamzer. We know what they are. Chai krisis. This is bezin. They wouldn't go back, even though literally they're married, but they would not go back. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Afa Boine Bias Al Mechoinoi Lo Hoya Chayza. Says Rabbi Yehuda, let's say you rebuild your house. Let's say you had a fire and the house burnt down, and you have to rebuild it. Even if you have to rebuild it, you wouldn't go back. That's not considered a bias chadash. It may be a new house, maybe a new home, but it's not a new house. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Afa Boine Bias Levanim Bisharon. Sharon seems to be a place that inferior bricks, and every 3.5 years would fall in. He says, since it falls in, and it fell in, and you're gonna have to rebuild a house. Nonetheless, you won't go back. Tanakamas mashma, you would go back. Now, elu she'ein zozim im kaima, right? These are the ones that they don't stay. They don't leave at all. In other words, there's 2 madregas so far. We have people who went to the battle site and returned. We have people who went to the battle site and remained. And now we have people who don't even go to the battle site at all. In other words, they stay, they never went to hear the speech. They remained behind, right? And says they never went to hear the speech. So these are the ones, the Elu Shein Zozim Kaimai, they don't leave the houses at all. They don't even go to the boundaries they stay home. Misha Bona Bias V'Chanachai, right? He built a house and he was mechanech it, but he didn't live in it yet. The chenim not the kerem the chiluloi. He went ahead. He planted a kerem. He was mechalel it, but the 4th year wasn't finished yet. The chenim noisi as arusasoi. He married his arusa, or koines as yevimtoi, and so it's the 1st year of marriage. Shenemar naki year lebeislei shana achas. He should be naki for 1 year. Lebeislei. What does lebeislei mean? Is that beislei that a house that he had? He was mechanech the house, but he hadn't lived in it yet. Right? He hadn't lived in it yet. For a year, you get a waiver. You get a draft waiver for a year. Yiyeh zekarmoi. That meaning he didn't get a chance to use the fruit yet. V'simach es ishtoi, so ishtoi. That again, you have a year to go ahead and misameach with your wife. Shana mishayna. Ashalakach lehevi es yevimtoi. That would include a yavama, right? And these people they'd stay home and ema speak in mayim mazon. They not only they stayed home, they didn't have to work either. They didn't have to provide food, drink, or stay home. So it comes out, let's go over 3 madregas. We have the people who would go to the battle site, right? And then there was the people who hadn't been mechanech their house yet, people who just got engaged with kedushin, people who have planted a vineyard and if they hadn't been mechalo, then they would go ahead and get the speech and they would go back home. They would go back home. What would they do when they get back home? They would work. They would go ahead, provide food, drink for the soldiers, and clean the roads. Then you had people who their bias is not considered a bias, their marriage is not considered a marriage, and their kerem is not considered a kerem. They would stay. Then you have one that they're up to the next stage. They did erisin and they're mamish holding by the shana rishayna. They built a house and then living in the house, but they haven't lived in it a year. They had the kerem. It was 4th year. They haven't had the no yet. They began. They stay home and they don't provide anything. Those are the 3 madregas. Says the Gemara, Tan Rabban. Okay, Tan Rabban. We're going to now explain again. We're going to go over, guys, the 3 things. The first one was that what bias chadash, and he didn't get melech chanchai. Second was what was not the kerem v'lechiloloi, and third was a woman that eris v'lei lekacha, but he didn't do lekuchen. Those are the 3 things, and we're going to darshan each one. The Mishnah, the Brisa will elaborate upon the Mishnah. Tan Rabban. Pasuk says, "Dibru hashoitrim eloam leimar mi yisha shebana bias." So Yachol, I would think that the shoitrim speak devarim shel atzman. In other words, that the kohen doesn't tell them what to say, but they're saying their own words. When it says the yasu hashoitrim, as it says again, we have 3 loshanas, guys. The nikshu hakoyin, V'dibru hashaytrim, v'yasvu hashaytrim. When it says v'yasvu, when you say in addition to, it means it must be adding on to something. V'yasvu hashaytrim, and it says, Hare dvorim mishal atzman amar. V'yasvu hashaytrim is saying their own words, right? V'yasvu hashaytrim, they're saying their own words. Hamani mekayim v'dibru hashaytrim. Why are we going to say the pasuk before v'dibru hashaytrim? It must be v'divrei meshuach mulchama hakasa medaber. So the nigash hakayin is the kayin himself. The yasvu hashaytrim is the shaytrim themselves. The dibru hashaytrim is the shaytrim speaking the words of the kayin. Again, the nikshu hakayin is the kayin. The yasvu hashaytrim their own words. The dibru hashaytrim is the words of the kayin. That's the middle one. The words of the kayin. So divrei meshuach mulchama hakasa medaber. Haketzad. Kayin medaber, the Kayin would speak, v'shaitim hashminas debarov, and the Kayin would go ahead, and the shaitim would tell over to the Am what he said. So, Tani Chada, Kayin medaber, v'shaitim hashmiya. One brisa says the Kayin would speak, and the shaitim would announce it. The Tanya Idach, Kayin medaber, v'Kayin hashmiya, the Kayin would speak, and the Kayin would announce it. The Tanya Idach, shaitim medaber, v'shaitim hashmiya. The shaitim spoke, and the shaitim was medaber. Very geshmakaish. You know the answer. Rabbiya, ha-ketzad. Mivi nigash, the word v'nigash hakayin, until va'ad, the word v'dibru, those words Shema Yisrael, that you know that the lashon of the pasuk is Shema Yisrael takrev mayom ulchama avechem. That it was the words of the kayin, right? Hakayin medaber v'kayin mashmiya. He would say that v'dibru, from the words v'dibru at to the yasvu, which was the whole thing about the house, the kerem, and the eresh. That the kayin medaber v'shaitim mashmiya. The Yasfu, and they would continue to speak at the end of the parsha. So when it says that the Yasfu has shaitim medaber la'am v'amru miya ish hayarav rach levav ye'elef v'yashal lebeisai la'yima says levav achiv v'kavavai. Those are the words of the shaitim themselves. Guys, good. Again, so Torah Shebal Peh explaining the Torah Shebal Peh explaining clearly the Torah Shebal. The Nigash according to Shema. The Dibra Shaitim is the Kayin to the Shaiter. The Yasva Shaitim is the words of the Shaiter himself. Okay. Now let's go over each one. We have bias, we have Kerem, and we have Erison, right? So we're going to discuss the first two today. We're going to do bias, and we're going to go into Tzrayim, and we're going to go to do something about, we're going to learn a lot about Harakava grafting today. Who is the person who built a Bayis Chadash? Okay, so that's what it says. The person who built a Bayis Chadash, he should go home. Good. Now, we said whether he built a house of Tevin, whether he built a house of Bakar, a house of Eitzreis, all those things. Okay, what does that mean? Tan Rabbanan. Where do you know this from? It says Miya Yisha Shebana Bayis. Good. Ainli Ela Rabbis Ela Shebana. I only have mamash a house. Lokach, only if he built it himself. Ashebana, the act of building. Lokach v'yarish v'nitel matana. How do you know if he acquires it through a sale or through Yerusha or through matana? How do you know that's included? Talmud Leimar mi ish shebana. The word ish is extra, guys. So when it says the word ish, that's extra to darshan. A person, not only a person that built, but a person who receives a gift, a person gets Yerusha, a person who buys something. The word ish goes ahead and includes those what? Includes those different ways of acquiring property. Okay. This says bias, ainly ela bias. Only a house would he go back. How do I know to include those enclosures as well? Talmud Leimar, asher bona bias. It doesn't say asher bias bona. It doesn't say asher bias bona, asher bona bias. The fact that they put the verb before the noun, mikol makam, any type of binyan, as long as it's a binyan that's considered a house. Yachol, therefore, if it's considered a binyan, I would think Shani Marbai can also include Afa Boine Beis Hashar, a watchman's gate, Achsadra, Umir Peset, that also you return from battle. Hamad Loima bias. Not bias a royal Ladira, just like a bias is royal Ladira, Afkol royal Ladira. So base Oitzris, base Abakar, base Abakar, all these places are royal Ladira. It's supposed to be Achsadra, it's supposed to be a Peset, there's not royal Ladira, and therefore what would not be included. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, right? Bias kimashmai. He disagrees. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says a bias means a bias. So anything else would not be acceptable. He disagrees with the Mishnah. A beis hateven, a Beis HaBakar, a Beis Eitzreis, would not be included. They would not be included, even though. So he disagrees with the Tanakama. Okay. Now the pasuk says, you build a house. V'loi chanachai. Now the choices of words, it could have said v'loi chanach. It doesn't say chanach. Chanach is lashon of beginning to use something. Lashon chinuch means haschala l'davar. We spoke out. So it says shabona bayis chadash v'loi chanachai. What's the extra vav? So the Gemara makes the following drasha. It says v'loi. It doesn't say v'loi chanach. It doesn't say v'loi chanach. It says v'loi chanachai. Prat legaslin. If you would steal a house, it has to be his house and not someone else's house. If you would steal a house, you would not go home from battle. If you would steal a house, you wouldn't go home. That's it. You steal the house, you won't go home. Good. So it's mashma according to this that only because you have a miyut to tell me you don't go back. Why that? But it's mashma. What about a regular aveira? You would go back. You would not go back. It's telling me over here. I needed a pasuk to tell me if you steal a house, you don't go back. Mashma regular aveira, then you would stay by the battle. The Gemara yes right away. Let's say Lema the Lake Rabbi Yosef Glili. Let's say this is not in conjunction with Rabbi Yosef Glili. The Rabbi Yosef Glili, Amar, he's of the opinion. It says Rach Halevov. Why is he scared? He's scared. He's scared from the Averis in his hands. So fellas, why would I need the pasuk of Chanachai to tell me a stolen house you don't go back for? Right? I know you don't go. I know you. Right? According to Rabbi Yosef Glili, you would go back. Why would you go back? Because you're Averis. You stole. So obviously, it must be if you have a limit Chanachai, it must be. It doesn't go like Rabbi Yosef Glili. That's why not feel Rabbi Yosef Glili going to Abad Tshuva. He did Tshuva, the Yov Demei, and he gave the money. So in other words, since he went ahead, he stole it, he did Tshuva, and then he bought it. So let Rabbi Yosef Glili, you're not over an Averi yet. So Rabbi Yosef Glili would need Chanachai to tell me in that situation, you still don't go back. Right? The Gemara, why don't you go back? Ulahadar, go back. You have a house that you never lived in, right? So why don't you go back? Says, well, I'll tell you why. Even the Meikara B'Taris Gezela Sliyadeh, since the way it came to him was B'Taris Gezela, then Loi, we're not letting you go back. So therefore, if Chanachai, even Rabbi Yosef Glili would say that if you didn't have Averi, you went home. Over here, you needed a limit to tell me not that you would not go back home, because you would think that since it's a house, you would go back home. Kamash Malon the Kiddush, that since it came to your hands through Gezela, you won't go back home.
That's Kanas, Mike? Is that?
I don't know what the limit is. That it says that it's mashma that I guess so. Or maybe. What's the svara? The svara is that you didn't have enough from something. So if it comes in a normal way, we give you that exemption. If it comes, maybe I guess kanas. I guess again, it comes in an abnormal way. We're not going to let you gain through a means of an avera, even though you've done tshuva. The bottom line is maybe the person went to sold it to you and you had stolen it. Who knows? Okay. So the next exemption was, let's get a lashon. Umiya ish, and who's the miya ish? Ashenota kerem. He planted a kerem. He wasn't able to go ahead and get usage from it because the 4th year has not passed yet, right? That's what it means. Now, the Mishnah had stated it's lav dafka kerem. It's all kinds of different agriculture. Tana Rabbanan, it says asher nata, ainli elenata, only if you planted it yourself. Lokach, if you bought the vineyard, the Yoresh, or you inherited the vineyard, the Nitin Leben Matano, you received it as a present, minayin that you would return from the battle site. Tamad Leimar, Umiya ish ashenota kerem, who is the man who planted a kerem? Again, the word ish being extra. Ainli ela kerem, minayin l'rabbeis chamisha ilone maichel. How do I know even 5 fruit-bearing trees that are not a kerem? By filo b'sharminim, even other species. Tamad Leimar, ashenota. It could say nata, nata. It says ashenota. Yachol shani marba hanoitea arba ilone. I might think it would include someone who planted 4 trees, Michael, which doesn't have the configuration, does not called the kerem. You need 5 trees to be called the kerem. The chamesh ilone srak, non-fruit bearing trees that you would go back. Tamaboimar kerem. That's the exclusion. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Vayner, kerem kemashmoi. Kerem, the only thing you go back for is the kerem, right? V'lo chilel, now, okay, so that's period. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Vayner, kerem mashmoi. Again, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov l'shitasai, just like I said, bias was dafka bias, and not a base teven, and not a base oiser, and not a base bakar. Who I did when it says not the kerem, it means kerem, and it doesn't mean an orchard. It means a vineyard. It doesn't mean an orchard. Now it could have said, like we had in the Amid Aleph guys, loy chanach, and said chanachoi. Over here it says, it could have said loy chilel. It says loy chileloi. Prat, lemavrich, a person who layers, ulemark, even a person who grafts. Meaning you would not go back if you grafted or you layered. Let's just focus on grafting because that's the Gemara's kasha, guys. So we have it kasha now. We just said in the Mishnah, it's lav dafka nata, but even harkava, even grafting, you would go back. And now we have a brisa that states that you don't go back. That's our problem. That's the rest of the daf, guys. Let's get the kasha. Our Mishnah clearly stated, right? Our Mishnah, go back to the Mishnah. Go back to the Mishnah. In the middle of the Mishnah, it says, "Umiya yesha not the kerem lechilaloi. Echad neteya kerem, v'echad neteya chamisha elama achol. B'afilu mechameshes aminim. Echad neteya, v'echad amavrich, v'echad amarkiv." You would go back. You would go back. Good. Now by us, what does it say? It says chilaloi, prat. What does it exclude? Lemavrich ulemarkiv. Read the Gemara. V'anan tanan echad neteya, v'echad amavrich, v'echad amarkiv. So how do you explain that? I'm Mishnah saying you would go back for grafting, and here it says you don't go back for grafting. So Amr Rabbi Zeira, Amr Rav Chisda, lo kash. It's not a problem. Kan be'harkovas iser, kan be'harkovas heta. Our Mishnah is speaking where you had a peach tree and you put a peach branch on it. That is speaking about a peach tree, and you went ahead and you put something else on it. You put a plum branch on it to make a nectarine. You know, a nectarine is a combination. There's no such thing as a nectarine tree. A nectarine is a graft of a peach and a plum. So even though we eat it, of course, it's not asar b'hana, but we would not be able to be a nectarine, right? So Memela, when does it say our Mishnah that you would go back? That's if it's a pure bred peach tree. When wouldn't you go back by nectarines? Because they what? Because they're asar. That's issa. Okay, so. What exactly is the peach tree? We're using peach tree as an example, right? You have a peach tree with a peach branch. Now, guys, there's two possibilities. The trunk of the tree, the main part of the tree, is within 3 years or 4 years, and the branch obviously is also within 4 years. Or the tree can be a 10-year-old tree, and the branch would be within a 3-year tree. And then you have the shaila, what din does the branch get? Does it stay, in the case of an old tree, does it become muta because it's considered part of the old tree or not? And that leads itself to the following question. If you're telling me that it's a din in grafting, if it's a young tree and a young branch, typically you're going back to put a young tree. Forget the branch. The peach tree itself was less than 3 years old, right? You're telling me that the tree itself is young and the branch is young. So it says you would go back for the branch. Forget the Gemara. What? Forget the branch. You're going back for the tree itself. Oh, Ella, what are you going to say? That the tree was a 10-year-old tree and the branch was a 3-year-old branch. And the mela for the tree, you wouldn't go back because you had enough from it already, but you could go back for the branch. Guess what? The branch gets the dinner of the tree. So therefore, you wouldn't be able to go back. So Mamanu Shach, the Gemara is telling what's the case where you're going back only for the graft. Again, you're only going back for the grift. That's the Gemara. That's the Gemara we're going for right now. So it says the Gemara, Hechidami. What's exactly this case of Hakovas Heta? Ilema Yolda be Yolda. It's within, again, you haven't had enough from the tree yet, and now you haven't had enough from the branch yet. Typically, that you go back home. The boy Mahada, why? Mishum Yolda Rishayna. Because of what? The Yalda Rishayna, meaning the tree itself. Forget the branch. Elder, so must be speaking what? Yolda Bisikena, it must be speaking about a young branch and an old tree. And for the old tree, you wouldn't go back because you could have enough from it, but you would go back what? For the branch. Why? Because you don't have enough from it yet. Yolda shesivcha bisakena, a yolda that you grafted to a sakena, but leyolda bisakena, the aim din arla. So guys, I'm stuck. What exactly is the case of what? Of harkava, of heta, that you're allowed to go back? Mashma, you're going back for the grafting part. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. What are you going back for the grafting part? If it's a young tree, you're going back for the tree part, forget the graft. And if it's an old tree, you would go back for the graft because the graft has a din of the old tree. Geschmack? Geschmack akasha. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, la'olam yolda b'yolda. So what's akasha? You're going back for the tree itself. Guys, okay, again, yolda b'yolda. And therefore, and what's the kasha? Then why do you care about the graft, the tree itself, you're able to go back for? Ukigoin, the nata lahach kamaisa l'sayog u'l'kairis. When you planted this peach tree, one or two things. One, you wanted to go ahead, you planted it, there was a hole by a fence. You planted by the hole, not for the peaches, but you planted it what? For taking up the hole in the fence. You planted the sayog, asa sayog the Torah, fence. Or you planted it because you like peach wood, but you didn't plant it what? So if you didn't plant it for the payris, it doesn't have a din of arla. Since I'm planting it for either the fence or the wood, you then go ahead and you take a branch that you want to go ahead and grow payris from. That you want to grow payris from. So a very geschmack. For the tree itself, I wouldn't return because I don't need it for the payris. Why am I returning? Only for the graft that I wanted for the payris that I attached to the young tree. That's the teretz. One more time. Beautiful. Rabbi Yirmiyah. It's speaking young be young. I have a question. You're returning for the tree itself. You planted it for a fence. You planted it for wood, for beams, but memela you would not return for it. What are you returning for? The graft that you grafted to the tree for its payris. Someone who goes ahead and plants this sayog l'kairis is patam rola. Okay, so guys, now let's go through this. So what's akasha? There's a case. We need a case where you're only returning for the harkava and not for the tree itself. So I got a case. Yalda be yalda. Fred the Gemara, yalda be yalda, returning for the tree. And for the Gemara, I'm not returning for the tree. The tree is miyuchid for what? For wood. Since it's miyuchid for wood, be wood for kairis or wood to go ahead and take up an expanse of a fence. And now what am I doing? I'm putting payris on. So are we viewing the tree and the payris as a separate entity? Are we viewing the tree and the branch as a separate entity? We are. We don't say that the payris are bottled to the tree and therefore there's no din of arla. We're saying there is, correct? That's what we're saying. We have two entities over here. We have a tree that I'm not returning for because it's for wood, but the branch that's grafted to the tree, that's for payris. Let's go back to the other case. I got a tree that's 10 years old. I've been having enough of this tree for 6 years, right? Now I'm grafting a branch to it that's within 3 years, and guess what? This branch is bottled to the tree. Fred the Gemara Kasha, why by the case of the old tree and the branch, we're saying this is bottled to the tree? Why by the case of that you're suggesting now that this is for wood and this is for payris? Why don't we say that this is payris is bottled to the wood and you wouldn't be turned from it? Let's say the graft that you grafted to the tree, since the tree itself wasn't for payris, the tree was only for the wood or it could be used for the fence, that the branch that's connected to it also should be bottled and it should have been a din of arla and you should not be able to turn from the war. What's the difference between that and the old tree? That's the Gemara's kasha. Fred the Gemara kasha, umayshna yolda bisakena de butla, where we say a young branch is bottled to the old tree and there won't be a din of arla. Umayshna yolda be yolda, where the tree was used for wood, the light butla. Geschmack. And for the Gemara, Hasam over there, imimlach Allah, lav bas mahadib he. By the tree that's 10 years old, if you would go ahead and say, I want that tree to have a din of arla, what's the din? Nothing. In other words, it's been there, done that. It had its first 3 years. It had its fourth year. There's no switching this tree. This tree is what it is. Hacha, but over here, by this tree that's used for wood, imimlach Allah, if you would change your mind and you could use it for fruit, bas mahadahi, right? Right? Pirish. I got a distinction. You want to know why by the old tree that it's bottled to that? Because the old tree will remain what it is. a tree that's mutter for its peiros, and therefore anything attached to it will get its din. Masha'enkein, the din of the tree that's used for wood, that's not etched in stone. Excuse the pun. It's not etched in stone. It's not carved in wood, right? It could change. Why? I want it for the fence. I want it for its beams. 1 second. You know what? No, I want it for its fruit. Oh, you can go ahead and change the status of the tree. Mamela what? The branch is not bottled to it. Since you could change the status of the tree, the branch is not bottled to it, and therefore I could return to the graft for more on a tree that you went ahead and planted for its wood. That's the first teretz. That's the first teretz to the kasha. You want to know what's the case of hakova avissa? That it's mutter that you're returning for the branch and not the tree. The tree is for wood. The branch is what is for the branch is for peiros. Now, where do you know you could change your mind, right? A tree that grew by itself. Did nan if it grows by itself, you chayav in orla. Good. Okay. I could have had a very, very good teretz. Guys, outside. Dov Sandberg and I are partners in a tree, right? Dov Sandberg and I are partners in a tree. Dov Sandberg owns the tree, and Rabbi Stern owns the graft. So I got a very good teretz. Dov returns to the battle site because he owns a tree. Eliezer Stern returns to the battle site because he has a grafted branch. So the chiddush is that I can return from a grafted branch. This seemed to be a much better teretz, an easier teretz, than being doichik and saying, oh, it's speaking about a tree that you planted for wood. Most people don't plant, fruit trees for wood. The Gemara considered, Rashi says, a doichik to teretz. So in other words, l'chayro, we had a very, very easy teretz. What's that kasha? The kasha is, what's the hechatimsa of a person returning for the branch and not for the tree? The hechatimsa would be when one person owns the branch and one person owns the tree. So the person owns the tree returns for the tree, the person owns the branch returns for the branch. And why don't we give that teretz? Says the Gemara. Amar Rav Papa. So I say, excuse me, I skipped. But look me be kerem shoshne shutfin. Let's be a kerem, 2 partners. The high hoda adidei by hoda adidei. Each one's returning for his own part. So I'm Rav Papa. So I say meres kerem shoshne shutafim ein choizim alav me'arkem l'chama. Right. The kerem of shutfim is you would not return from l'chama. In other words, in that hekatimsa, if 2 shutfin own the kerem, you would not go ahead and return. You would not go ahead. A kerem shtei shutfin, you would not go ahead and return from Milchama. Okay. Why? Because I guess it's not considered karmoi. I guess it's not considered. It's kerem. You need a kerem that's miyuchid loy, and it's not mat. Right. It's not miyuchid for that. Says the Gemara, umayshna mechameshes achim umeis echad mehem b'Milchama. 5 brothers. One of them dies in war. So you have 4 brothers left, and you have 1 widow. The kulin chayzim, they all go back. So in other words, why kerem? It has to be miyuchid to 1. So also by yibum, it should be miyuchid to 1. Why do they all go back? So over there, for each one, it's possible to be said ishtay. Hacha by the kerem kol chad b'chad like karina bekarmai. Okay, so right now, so very geshmak. Let's go over. We have a kasha. What's a kasha? What's the hechatimsa? We have a stira. What's a stira? Amishta says you would return for more for a graft. The Brisa says you wouldn't return from the more from the graft. We're giving a terrace. The Brisa is speaking about where you planted a nectarine tree. It's klayim. You don't go back. The Mishnah is speaking where you planted a peach tree and a peach tree, you would go back. Read the Gemara, if it's a peach tree, we got a kasha. If it's a young tree, so why forget about the branch? I'm returning before the tree itself. And for the Gemara, the tree itself is used for wood. Since the tree itself is used for wood, you're not returning for that. The only thing you'd be returning for is what? Is the graft that's grafted to the tree. We asked the kasha, why wouldn't it get the din of the zakena? We said the difference is that you can have karata, and therefore the tree for wood could be used for fruit. Very geshmak. Why don't we give an easier teretz and say that speaking about 2 ownerships in the tree, 1 person owns the tree, 1 person owns the branch. So the person is returning from the branch. The Gemara says that case is not considered karmo. Neither one would return. By Yibum, they all return because they're all considered their wife. The Zika is all considered their wife. Okay, says the Gemara. Another teretz. Rav Nachman Yitzchak another teretz. Ben mavrich, this is really markiv. This says marvrich is layed. Now markiv means grafting. Elon b'yerek. Again, I don't know about agriculture, but a yerek is not, you wouldn't return from the battle for yerek, but if you get a fruit tree attached to some type of vegetable, in that case, the tree would not, you won't return for the tree, but you would return for the Paris. Hamavich Elon b'yerek, someone who grafts an Elon to a yerek, Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, mater, it's permitted, right? Right? Mishum Yehuda ben Gamda Ish Kfar Akom, in the name of Yehuda ben Gamda Ish Kfar Akom. So since it's permitted, guys, it's Harkova Shel Heter. If it's Harkova Shel Heter, we said our Mishnah, you could return from Milchama. The Chachamim Moisrim, and the Chachamim of the opinion, no. The Chachamim say that what? It's considered Isser, and since it's a Kalayim, it's a nectarine tree, you would not return. But it's not, you won't return. Okay? So we have two Terutzim to the Kasha of what exactly is the Harkova of Heter. Again, starting back, the original question, Amishta says Harkova you would return. Brisa says you would return. The teretz is the Brisa is be'issa, our Mishnah is beheta. Now kasha, we stayed with that teretz. We just needed the heichetimtza of heter. We have two heichetimtzas of heter. Either the tree is for wood, or the tree is not a tree at all. It's a yerek, and therefore you'd only return for the graft. Now we're going to give another teretz to the original question. We're not going to say it's speaking about heta. We're not going to say it's speaking about issa. We're going to say it is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Says the teretz. Says the Gemara. Kiyasav dimi am Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. I skipped. Kiyasav dimi am Rabbi Yochanan hamani Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Who's the Tana of the Brisa who says it's asa? It's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Right? Lo yomar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov hasam keren kimashmoi hachanami nota kimashmo noita in marvich umarkiv loy. So guys, we said in our Mishnah that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov was very meduyak. When he was very right. The only thing you're going to turn for, guys, is what is a kerem. And it says not a kerem. What did you do? You planted a kerem. You had to plant the kerem, right? If you didn't plant the kerem, you're not returning. If you do harkava, that's not planting, right? You didn't plant the original tree. And Mela, like Eliezer ben Yaakov, the Brisa goes according to him. So it's machlokes tanoim. Our Mishnah goes according to one Tana, the Brisa goes according to Eliezer ben Yaakov. No fancy terutzim, and everything is squeaky clean. So we have Baruch Hashem, we have Mahalach. Two terutzim to the Kasha, the stira from the Brisa to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah speaking Beheta, this is speaking of Issa. Our Mishnah speaking one Tana, the Mishnah of Issa speaking of Eliezer ben Yaakov. Now, since we mentioned Rabdimi in the name that brought in the name of Eliezer ben Yaakov, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, we're going to mention other halachos, which are total digression, which have nothing to do with what we've been discussing until now. Good. Hopefully everything's clear, guys. This our cover, everything's good. I think so. I hope so. As I always say, if I understand it, I'm convinced other people understand it as well, which there's no guarantee, but in my mind, like if you say something, you feel people don't agree as well. Okay, continuing on. Let's say you have a short, something that grows, but it's really short. It's really short. In other words, it looks like a sapling. Have you ever seen in the nurseries, they have saplings. A tree takes time to grow. This tree, no matter how old it gets, it's a shorty. It always looks young. It never reaches its age. Chayev Arla, right? It's Chayev and Arla. You know why? All its years is Chayev and Arla. Even if it's 10 years old, it's Chayev and Arla. Midrabanon. The mischazyu could bashasa because it appears like a 1-year-old tree. This is din of Marasayan. This is din of Marasayan, fellas. People are going to see you going ahead and using the fruit from this short tree. What are they going to say? The guy is over in the Issa of Arla. So Memela says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, for the life of this tree, it always has a din of Arla. Bahani Mili, there's an addendum to that. When is that? Is Shtayim Keneged Shtayim V'Yachas Yoytze Zonov. That's provided it looks like a kerem, which is that configuration that Rashi has in the Yom Aleph. Avokule kerem, if it's all a kerem, meaning it's not the 5 configuration, guys. It's you have, you ever see the vineyards that are lined up? You have lined up, and they're all a bunch of shorties, right? They're all a bunch of trees that look young. Then kola islay, there's a coil that states that, you know what? This is Azayidas. These are trees that are uniquely different, and people are not going to say that what he's being over on. A mace dies, you're not able to say within that Dalet Amos of the mace, you can't say Kriya Shema Tsiv, Loig Larosh, someone who's loig for the poor, in this case, the dead person, Feref Iseu, he's mamish being Macharef, the one who made him, the Bizoyim. That's why when we go to a cemetery, we always put out tzitzis in, we read tzitzis out, because you're like laughing at the mason that they can't wear tzitzis. Amar Yitzchak, Amar Yitzchak, Amar Yochanan, Mishum Rebbe Elazar ben Yaakov, for Gosai, Hegdila Beina Achim, let's say you have a stepdaughter that's not, in other words, it's cannot relate it to a woman gets married to a man, she brings a daughter into the marriage, and the man has a son from another marriage. So they literally can marry each other. There's no problem. There's no blood connection whatsoever. So a stepsister that grows up Beina Achim, Asruli Nasi La'achim. It's also to marry the Achin. Why? The Mischazeki Achstayu, right? And because people are going to think that it's their sister. However, V'lohi, that's not the halacha. Kala Islay Lemilse. There's a call to the matter, right? There's a call to the matter, and people will know. Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rebbe Elazar ben Yaakov, Leket Shichu Repeya She'asoyim B'Goyrin, right? Hook for Lemaisa. In other words, we know that Matnas Aniyim is potter from Maisa. Matnas Aniyim is potter from Maisa. So this only takes his leket, takes his shicha, takes his peya, and he piles it up. It looks like that it's one goyrin, and then we chayiv a Maisa. You chayiv a Maisa the Rabbanan. Amarulu Layamorin that you chayiv el b'sadei. He does it in the field. Aval be'ir kala islay l'molsa. In the city, you know what's going to happen? He's going to be in leket piecemeal. He's going to be in shicha piecemeal. He's going to be in peya piecemeal. So people will see him bringing in piecemeal. They won't think that it's one fell swoop. In the field, where if they see one pile, they'll say, "Oh, it's still in the field." Then it's really not leket. It's not shicha. It's not peya. And to avoid people saying that it's chiyav deraisa, but the Rabbanan take it off. Masha'in Kain in the city, a call would be to the matter that this ani is accruing all his matnas and even one spot, and therefore it would be unnecessary to go ahead and take off Maisa. Okay, we'll stop here. And Mazel Tov to Dr. Press on the impending engagement of his granddaughter, my great niece, and that explains our presence this morning here. The shidduch should be aliyafa, and they should be zeichet to be bringing the
Mazel Tov.
Israel.
Mazel Tov, very nice.
Mazel Tov.
Mazel Tov.
Very nice, Dr. Press.
All good things. And for the record, if anyone